Okay, so I just achieved 100% completion in Pikmin 4, and I found the game to be mostly delightful. The long wait time between entries in the series has once again proven to be worth the wait. The basic gameplay loop is extremely rewarding, the multitasking gameplay is as satisfying as ever, and the vast majority of the new ideas being implemented are engaging and whimsical and fun. Most of what I have to say about the game is glowingly positive. I recommend you go play the game now, but I am going to have some nitpicking and negative stuff to say, and I think there are some major flaws. Oh, and warning, this video is definitely going to contain spoilers for the entirety of the Pikmin franchise, including all of Pikmin 4 and its post-game content, so be warned, tune out if you must. I'm going to be starting off on a more negative note, but let's talk about Oatchi. I can never blame anyone for liking Oatchi, seeing as he was scientifically engineered in a marketing laboratory to have wide cutesy appeal, obviously, but that's kinda exactly the issue. I can't help but shake the feeling that the Pikmin team strayed away from their original vision. Even after completing and enjoying the game in its entirety, I still never really shook the feeling in my core that Oatchi was totally out of place. However, I will say the cool thing about Oatchi and the general dog theme that is prevalent throughout Pikmin 4 is that it actually does have a basis in the franchise's roots, going all the way back to Pikmin 1, where we do see a picture of Olimar's dog, Bulby, alongside his family in one of Olimar's nightly logs. Bulby is referred to as a dog, but is clearly not a canine in the way that we understand canines to be on Earth. He actually looks similar to a Bulborb, which might seem odd, but it comes across as kind of endearing when you realize that the names and classifications of the enemy creatures in Pikmin are all canonically assigned to them by Olimar himself. The Bulborbs resembling his dog back on Hecate is why they're called Bulborbs. He named them after his dog. The family they belong to is appropriately called Grub Dogs. Dogs, their role in the Pikmin universe, is something that is not only well established, but fundamental to the lore of some of the most iconic enemies in the entire series, the Bulborbs. Oatchi isn't from Hecate canonically, so dogs on the planet he's from could be different, and that kind of makes sense. But still, it's just really weird when we've already seen what a dog looks like in this universe, for this thing to just show up. A good comparison here is, you know in SpongeBob, how Gary is a cat? He's a snail, obviously, but he's SpongeBob's pet cat, right? He meows. Well, imagine if there was suddenly an episode of SpongeBob where SpongeBob got an actual pet cat. Just a regular cat. That would be pretty weird, right? I mean, barring the fact that cats can't breathe underwater, it would still just be weird, because Gary is a cat. Snails are cats. And the same applies for Bulborbs in Pikmin. They're dogs. Why didn't we just get Bulby as a companion? You know, Olimar taking his dog to accompany him would kind of make sense. But it also doesn't help that Oatchi doesn't even visually look like a Pikmin character at all. Like, if you just had no context whatsoever and just saw a picture of Oatchi himself for the first time, you would never in a million years guess that he was from Pikmin. But even having Bulby replace Oatchi would still have presented a major problem in that having a non-Pikmin in your party, especially one that is so central to the gameplay, feels fundamentally wrong in a series that is thematically and emotionally centered very specifically around Olimar's relationship with the Pikmin. Ironically, even Moss, both in name and design, looks and feels way closer to something from the Pikmin playbook, but I think this is why Olimar was paired up with Moss. Olimar is where Nintendo just stashes all the stuff that stays more true to the original spirit of Pikmin. But either way, Oatchi or Moss or Bulby being a constant third wheel between the captain and the Pikmin just feels totally at odds with the game's emotional core, and almost kind of belittles the Pikmin just by being present. The amount of stuff that Oatchi can do actually starts to beg the question of why a captain would ever bother with Pikmin at all. Just go get 10 Oatchis and you practically would be more powerful than having a full army of 100 Pikmin. And that's a really big problem in a game that's supposed to be totally centered around Pikmin. And the goofiest thing about all of it is that Nintendo literally came up with the perfect solution themselves and then opted not to use it. In concept art from the period prior to Pikmin 3, we've seen that the role of Oatchi was originally to be filled by a Bulbmin. This would have been so elegant and natural that I really don't know why they didn't go with this concept. The stem is perfect for Olimar to hang onto while riding around on the Bulbmin's back. It ensures that all of your troops are still technically Pikmin, and it reworks the concept of the now absent Bulbmin in a really cool way. It would be so sick if you just got one Bulbmin, a dwarf red Bulborb with a Pikmin stem sprouting out of the center of his back. Maybe we could have seen him eat a parasite Pikmin and finally got a glimpse of what they look like. I would have made them green with like a mustache that's not actually a mustache, but it's like mouth feeler things that they use to like bite into the brains after they get eaten. Really disturbing. But either way, A rideable Bulbman companion wouldn't have totally broken the lore of dogs in the Pikmin universe like Oatchi does. But at the end of the day, I guess it is the gameplay that matters, and for the most part, Oatchi is cool in that respect. Although I do think he has a bit of an identity crisis. He's not quite a second captain, but he's not really quite a Pikmin either. He's like this weird other thing that's kind of better than both of them and also just exists alongside them. I think they blew way too many gameplay ideas and concepts on Oatchi. Like, the best element of his gameplay, in my opinion, is riding on his back. It's a really basic mechanic, but it's a really cool addition. If you ride Oatchi's back, you gain tons of speed, but you lose some of the specificity with which you can control your Pikmin army, losing the ability to swarm enemies. In a game where you're constantly battling a time limit of some sort, this is an interesting fold and justifies the existence of a larger sized companion all on its own. I think they could have taken this even further and maybe limited it to where you can't even throw Pikmin if you're on Oatchi's back. But his ability to fight and carry objects is also fine, essentially acting as overpowered Pikmin that you order to charge in a given direction rather than throwing. But the actual charge ability he has, like the super charged up charge ability, having environmental puzzles specifically tied to the charge ability, like knocking stuff off of walls or from off of ledges, trivializes yellows and the potential for new Pikmin types that would have like a charge ability, as well as a full army of 100 Pikmin being able to ride directly on his back, all starts to feel like a lot going on. It trivializes water as a hazard even further, trivializing the movement of the Pikmin and making them feel more like items that are just being pulled out of your backpack than ever. I feel like all of this should have been like way more kept in check, where you could ride his back and you couldn't control Pikmin while you were doing that, and it mostly acted as a navigational tool, letting you jump onto small ledges, cross over water yourself, not with 100 Pikmin on your back, just the captain being able to cross over a body of water easily, able to carry 10 instead of Oatchi, who you can easily upgrade to carrying 100 weight. It's a lot. Oatchi should have been a Bulbman, and him technically being a Pikmin would have gone a long way to sort of resolve this issue, but even beyond that, just limit him to basic carrying, fighting, and being rideable. If he gets knocked out, you have to have other Pikmin drag the Bulbman back to the onion to be replanted and plucked anew. Lean into the strangeness of the fact that you have this weird parasitic companion. Leave the door open for other types of Bulbman, like Whip-tongue Bulbman, or a parasitic Pikmin-infested Bulbear. Breadman, like the community have come up with. That would be a perfect companion for Louie, by the way. A Breadman, the whole food theme, it's kind of writes itself, you know what I'm saying? You're just opening the door for so many creative ideas that still stay true to the basic core of the series and have everything that you're controlling still technically fall under the umbrella of Pikmin. Every type of Bulborb would have been liable to eventually get a stem in their back and become a new gameplay element. It's awesome. And speaking of Bulbman, let's talk about the glow Pikmin, and this is my next major negative about the game. These are not Pikmin, and what really annoys me about glow Pikmin is that they waste so many good ideas on what ultimately amounts to such a minor element of Pikmin 4. Let's talk about the night expeditions themselves, where you'll find the glow Pikmin. These missions are easily the most underdeveloped content in the game, despite the core concept of defending yourself against waves of oncoming enemies while frantically trying to grow yourself an army at the same time, is a really interesting gameplay concept. It reframes the Pikmin gameplay as an almost tower defense-like thing that, if executed with way more depth, could be really fun. However, this wasn't the case in the game. The night expeditions felt very stilted, easy, and odd. There were no unique creatures during the nighttime. The lighting filter used to convey the feeling that the missions were taking place in the dark and at night was often really ugly and not convincing. I hoped the environments would be really beautiful and horrifying and strange, but the missions instead just felt contrived and arcadey. And it all comes at the pretty high cost of completely undercutting the mystery and supposed danger of nightfall on PNF 404. You see, the dire and completely unsurvivable nature of the nighttime ecosystem on the Pikmin's home planet is the entire justification for the foundational structure of the Pikmin games, being centered around timed days that have to end at sunset. So much so that you have to abandon idle Pikmin to get left behind and eaten because you were just completely unwilling to risk staying on the surface. If the nighttime simply consisted of marching lines of slow-moving enemies that only care about attacking anthills and that can easily be defeated by any competent player and about 40 Pikmin, why were we fleeing the planet's surface every night the whole time? Olimar should have just stayed on the surface. He would have had way more time during those 30 days to collect those treasures. So yeah, I'm not a fan of the nighttime stuff, and the glow Pikmin themselves are included in that, because so many good ideas are wasted. First of all, calling them glow Pikmin was a huge misstep in my book. They don't have abilities that in any way actually involve glowing or using light. Pikmin that glow and light up an area around you if you take them into like a pitch black area is an idea that could have been really cool. Pikmin 4 even has upgrades for your captain to increase the range of their headlamp and light up dark areas. So the devs were at least flirting with the idea of darkness as a potential element to the environment that a light-based Pikmin could be implemented to help overcome. But glow Pikmin that we actually do get here don't function like that at all. They do in fact glow, but not in a way that affects the gameplay. They just canonically glow and look sort of luminescent, being a bright shade of green, and only come out at night. Glow Pikmin as they exist in Pikmin 4 would way more accurately be described as ghost Pikmin. Their unique properties are that they fly, they're unaffected by all elemental hazards, and they teleport directly back to you upon completion of an assigned task. They also technically can't die, and even the game itself suggests outright that they are not actually Pikmin at all, which is just so weird. It's like the devs going, yeah, we kind of know these things are weird as hell and don't really fit, so just don't count them, okay? It's weird. And I have to say, having literal ghosts mutate into a giant orb of ectoplasm and splash into enemies feels way too directly supernatural for Pikmin. The vaguely supernatural elements are usually subtle and far between. PNF 404 is implied to be pulling captains repeatedly towards it in a way that seems kind of supernatural. The nature of creatures like the Smoky Prog, or the Ghoulics, or the Water Wraith all have weird supernatural undertones. The Umibozu theory and all that jazz, elements that vaguely seem supernatural for sure. But sci-fi and a more biological approach is almost always at the forefront. Even things that are superficially absurd, like the Pikmin themselves and Bulbmin, are explained scientifically, albeit often in a humorous way, but still, having actual ghosts where Olimar as a scientist is leaving notes like, yeah, these things, they're just ghosts. It's like, what? Even with something like the Water Wraith, who's implied to be some sort of interdimensional force rather than a biological organism in a traditional sense, that's still more rooted in sci-fi than a ghost. An interdimensional alien may be super unbelievable and seem incomprehensible to us, but it's still a scientifically explainable phenomenon, even if a full explanation is not currently available. I guess you could view ghosts like this as well. Ghosts like aliens are possible, I suppose, but ghosts as a trope overall resonate much more with worlds rooted in fantasy and stuff like that. Ghosts go with magic, aliens go with science. Maybe I'm just being a purist about it, but why ghosts? And why use up a good name for light-related Pikmin on what are essentially ghost Pikmin? If the Bulbmin weren't going to make it in as the dog companion character, they could have at least taken the place of the glow Pikmin. And if you kind of combine this with my idea from before about having Oatchi be replaced by like a dwarf Bulbmin, just make the glow Pikmin into larva Bulbmin. They already crawl out of anthill-like holes in the ground. Just throw stems on their back and have them be the things that are pouring out of anthills at night. Make it so that you're going to harvest green Pikmin seeds that you then store in the onion, and the next time you bring a compatible creature back, like a dwarf Bulborb, you get another Bulbmin. But imagine you have all this focus on these different types of Bulbmin. The larva Bulbmin at night instead of glow Pikmin. A dwarf red Bulbmin as your companion instead of Oatchi. Louis having a Breadman as his companion. Whatever kind of evil captain you're going against, probably a Leafling, having a Bulbmin Bulbear as their person. And then at the end of the game, you defeat a huge Emperor Bulblax. He spits out a bunch of seeds into your onion. You bring his body back, and it's replanted in the ground as like a Bulbmin Emperor Bulblax with like 10 stems sticking out of his back. The same way that a traditional Emperor Bulblax has a bunch of, foliage sticking out of his back. Maybe then your entire army can ride on the back of the Emperor Bulbmin to smash through the final few hazards and do like the final little victory lap stretch of the game. It would be really awesome, and it would all build on this sort of parasite theme in a way that is way more resonant than what we got. Having Bulbmin of various types being able to roam around at night also makes sense with the established canon because, well, they're inhabiting the bodies of more physically capable enemy creatures without the instinct to flee the planet's surface at night. I don't entirely hate the idea of nighttime expeditions, but they felt like a total afterthought, and the ghost Pikmin did not help alleviate that at all. And P.S. for a glow Pikmin concept that's actually centered around lighting up dark areas, I would have made them look like this, and just called them orange Pikmin. The ghost-like tail makes their body kind of reminiscent of a candle's flame, which ties nicely in with the idea that they naturally glow warm orange light. Some floors of caves, or maybe even an entire area of the game, could be shrouded in darkness. Having glow Pikmin in your army would light up the area surrounding you and your Pikmin in a radius relative to the amount that you have. There could also be light bulbs or something on the map which you could assign orange Pikmin to fly into, and when the target number is reached, the light bulb would illuminate the entire room or area for as long as the orange Pikmin were left inside. If the orange Pikmin were whistled away from the light, it would fade back to darkness within a few seconds, similar to how ice will unthaw back into water if you whistle away ice Pikmin. I really think this would have been better implementation of a glowing ghost-shaped Pikmin type that isn't actually a ghost and does actually use light as their ability. But, whatever. Now, Leaflings. Leaflings are probably the best implemented of the major new additions to the Pikmin universe in Pikmin 4, on a conceptual level. The fact that they genuinely doubled down on the bad ending of Pikmin 1 and explored this concept more was really cool and not something I would expect given the morbid nature of that ending sequence. I do think they overdid it with the number of Leaflings. Being able to cure them instantly with random sap does sort of deflate the stakes of the fact that they're basically supposed to be dead. But I do like the name Leafling, and I like the updated design where the whole head is covered with leaf. But I especially like one Leafling character in particular, the Sage Leaf. This Dandori Master is easily the best new Pikmin character since Louie, in my opinion. He's a Leafling who sort of looks like an old man with bushy eyebrows, complete with gray color to boot, and he doesn't want to be cured of his Leafling status. He feels fulfilled and even enlightened in his life, practicing Dandori trapped on PNF 404. And the game presents this to you in a sort of funny way, where like, you don't really know if he's crazy and has just fallen prey to the will of this parasitic Pikmin force occupying his mind, or if he's legitimately enlightened, achieving a true oneness with nature through his Pikminification and Leafling lifestyle. His origins and prior identity are totally unknown, but given his general archetype, the unspoken lore that I kind of glean from this character is that he has been on the Pikmin planet for quite some time, potentially even being maybe the first person to ever crash on the planet, ultimately perishing and failing to escape. Having a wise old character who is technically dead but has reached a sort of nirvana state through oneness with plant life is not only genius for Pikmin, but it fits so perfectly into the morbid but still whimsical vibe of the universe. I love Leaflings. The challenges inside of their challenge caves are some of the most fun content in the game, despite feeling a bit contrived in terms of the setup. Again, a little arcadey, but dead captains being controlled hive-mindishly by Pikmin sprouts into robotically mimicking the actions of a living leader, forced to perform tasks with efficiency with the Pikmin forever as just sort of like a spiritual practice. It's a totally cartoonish justification for the gameplay here, but it's also hilarious and bizarre. I love Leaflings, and I think they should have centered the entire story around the Sage Leaf character. Have Olimar crash, Louie get kidnapped by the Sage Leaf, and being fed bits about his backstory would have been cool too. Replace Oatchi with a Bulbmin like I suggested way earlier, replace Glow Pikmin with the Bulbmin larva, and suddenly with these few changes, the entire game is centered around the parasitic Pikminification of other creatures. A way more disturbing, but way more cool and way more Pikmin-esque theme that doesn't overwrite the pre-established dog lore of the series. Reading bits of lore left behind by a captain from long, long ago, and then finding out that the Leafling who kidnapped Louie actually is that captain would have been a way better sort of thing than what we got in the game, where we obviously knew from the very first time we laid eyes on Leafling Olimar that he was Olimar. Now, Ice Pikmin. Ice Pikmin are the other star of the show in Pikmin 4, alongside Oatchi, which is awesome because they're one of the coolest Pikmin types we've gotten in quite some time. Ice and Frost and Cold always felt like the missing elemental Pikmin type, very often being among the most commonly fan-speculated Pikmin types, and their implementation in the game after all this time is really multifaceted and well considered. Every body of water in the game having an assigned freezing point, the number of Ice Pikmin required to freeze it, is so awesome. This adds an extra layer of depth to one of the most common and naturally occurring obstacles in the entire series, which on its own is super interesting, and it's super cute how the Ice Pikmin float and ultimately become frozen around the waist inside the body of water, and the frozen surface being walkable by other Pikmin Pikmin types, making every body of water a potential optional shortcut given the right number of ice Pikmin sacrificed to its frozen surface, is brilliant. Freezing enemies being an option, even shattering air-based enemies when they come tumbling down to the ground, also sets them apart in combat situations quite significantly, although I do think this aspect of their ability is prone to overuse and abuse. Freezing enemies very quickly became the ideal way to dispose of a too large number of enemies in the game. I mostly still like the idea, and there is the counterbalance included that shattered frozen enemies don't leave behind corpses to be collected, but it still felt like too often I was freezing enemies by default. Other than that, even the color assignment of ice Pikmin as cyan or light blue Pikmin is perfect. Not only because light blue is obviously the color of ice, but also because having water-based and ice-based Pikmin both be shades of the same color, blue, because they both deal with the same substance but in a different physical state, works really well. These guys are one of the best new things introduced in Pikmin 4, although I will say the absence of a totally snow and ice-based tundra level in this game is kind of baffling given the emphasis on the ice Pikmin, but oh well. There are some caves that emphasize ice and frost, to be fair. Olamar's Shipwreck Tale is the best piece of content in the entire game, and will most likely be the way that I revisit Pikmin 4 in the future. You play as Olimar, you get to play through the first 4 areas of Pikmin 4 from his perspective, and you have a 15-day time limit to collect 30 ship parts, and it's all structured like Pikmin 1. Upgrades are doled out based on which treasures you collect from each area. All of the yapping from crewmates and the more modern elements of Pikmin 4 have either been stripped out or cleverly reincorporated in a way that feels more in line with the spirit of the original Pikmin. This is basically the biggest love letter to Pikmin 1 fans we could have ever asked for. And some of the stuff they do here is so awesome. I am absolutely baffled that people have already managed to complete this in like 4 days, but I really shouldn't be at this point. As long as you collect all 30 parts in under 15 days, you unlock the second best content in the entire game, which is the Trial of the Sage Leaf. Yeah, the character that I was arguing should have been a way bigger element of the story earlier, he is the guardian of the secret dungeon in the game. It's a 10-floor cave, more or less, where you get some of the most unique and difficult challenges in the entire game, whether combat-based, multitasking-based, or, as a really cool bonus, recovering, finally, after all these years, the white and purple onions, finally allowing you to farm purple Pikmin to your heart's content. The way they made the purple and white onions the total focal point and the final unlockables for this secret dungeon was so cool as a fan who has been waiting since Pikmin 2 to have a way to farm these guys. Finally getting to see white and purple posies. All Pikmin types except glow Pikmin actually have onions in this game, and it's just so satisfying. But this also leads to one of the other problems in the game, and that is the 3 Pikmin type limit. What were they thinking? So we have all these Pikmin types, but we can only ever, even in the Piklopedia practice mode, which is awesome, even in that mode, you can only have 3 Pikmin types out on the field at once, and it's so restrictive. Imagine the sort of level design that you could get by having a final trial puzzle where you really have to manage all the types of Pikmin you've gathered throughout the game simultaneously. That's part of the franchise, and that's part of why people want more Pikmin types in the game. But in this game, every single time you go anywhere, they suggest what 3 types of Pikmin you're actually going to need in the area, and there's almost never a time in the entire game where you ever have any reason to question this suggestion or go against it. If you just go with the 3 types of Pikmin that they suggest to you, you will be able to do everything you encounter almost 100% of the time, with a handful of exceptions. And it's really disappointing. It takes such an emphasis off of actually having to manage your army and replay the game and take risks, and it's ironic because in this game you actually have a way higher ability to rewind time and start a day over, and they give you every opportunity to replay and redo and not have to commit to a botched run. So why limit me and handhold me by designing every area to only be compatible with 3 Pikmin types? I think it's an accessibility move, like they don't want to have people having to manage all these huge numbers of different Pikmin types, but I don't know, it really felt limiting and kind of lame, not being able to just see all of your Pikmin in a huge swarm with all the types lined up together, all intermingling. It's very odd. even beyond the effect that it has downstream on level design and stuff like that. Caves. Now, caves still totally fundamentally break up the entire main flow of the game, and I actually like that in Olimar's Shipwreck Tale there are no caves, and that is one of the things that makes it feel totally Pikmin 1 style. But the caves here are improved, at least in the sense that they are all hand designed and there's no procedural generation, and the fact that most of the caves are way more limited in the number of sub-levels in comparison to Pikmin 2. By halfway through Pikmin 2, you're encountering like really obnoxiously long caves all the time, and you were forced to replay caves to farm whites and purples if you let them die, which in this game you can eventually avoid. So caves are better for sure, but they still really do fundamentally disrupt the main flow of the game. They still kind of make the actual areas and main levels feel more like hubs with some bonus treasure to collect on them, and the caves seem like the actual dungeons or content. Honestly, the whole caves versus no caves discourse is one of the most hotly debated topics in Pikmin discourse, and it has been since the split between Pikmin 1 and 2, and I don't really know that I have too much to add to that, but I will say they need to just commit to one of two approaches. Make time still pass while you're in caves, so that going into one is a huge commitment and your Pikmin could die back on the surface, which would actually give you a reason to potentially bail on a cave, or just make caves like the Trial of the Sage Leaf and the Burrow of Beginnings, where they exist totally outside of the regular time loop. Maybe you could still find the cave entrances on levels themselves, but then you can just access them at night, which would also solve the current problem of the current night expeditions totally undercutting the danger of nighttime. Caves make sense to explore at night. They're underground. The surface is what's dangerous, right? So yeah, caves. They suck. But anyway, next up, items are really cool. Ever since Pikmin 1, bomb rocks have kind of been lingering around, morphing purpose, morphing form, but in general, the idea of carryable or equipable items is something that hasn't really been explored that deeply until Pikmin 4. So I was really happy to see all the different sort of items. You have freeze rocks as well as the bomb rocks, you have mines and homing bombs. I do think the lightning strike one is a little bit weird, like it's not really a gadget, it's just like actual god lightning powers like falling out of the sky. It's like a little bit strange. Pick carrots as decoys are awesome. Items are a really cool area to explore, and I'm glad they did. I do think it's kind of unfortunate that most of them, with the exception of one that I'll talk about at the end, are sort of just relegated to like backpack items that you can just buy and carry around with you at will. I think sort of having to relegate Pikmin to specifically carrying certain items is a way superior way of handling it. But yeah, the one item that they do kind of use in this way are the fire starters, which is a really cool element. It fleshes out red Pikmin some more, and they're basically these little acorns that set on fire, and you can assign a red Pikmin to pick them up, and you have to toss them onto piles of hay to burn them away and like open up new areas of the level. The whole element of escorting the fire starter wielding Pikmin between all these fire points and managing that was really fun. The only thing that's a little bit weird about it is constantly seeing like these like grills that you like get them off of. Is gas running to all of these, and it's a little bit weird seeing them just like scattered across the surface of like every location. It's a little bit odd. I wish the fire source that they came from was maybe something a little bit more like naturalistic. But other than that, I thought Pikmin 4's exploration of items and the implementation of fire starters was actually really cool. Lastly, there's Flarlick. I thought this was really cool. I liked the game's emphasis on collecting onions, and the Flarlick are basically neutral onions that you collect that will up your Pikmin count that you can have out on the field at any given time. I do think this is purely a step in the direction of like accessibility and casualization and slowing you down, but I do think conceptually bringing back like a raw onion bulb to expand the onion's capabilities is kind of cool. And I also don't entirely hate the idea of using the size of your army as a sort of gatekeeping method to force you to come back to maps later. Yeah, it wasn't implemented in a super interesting way in this game, but I like everything about it conceptually, and I liked the upped focus on the role of the onions in general. And I guess I also just wanted to say, yeah, I do kind of think one of my biggest issues with Pikmin 3 and 4 really is the whole shift of the tone of the series. And I understand that they're trying to make it cute and appeal to like a wider audience, but it already was cute, and the whole thing is like Pikmin 1 and 2 have a very specific tone and underlying like feeling. The clear standouts in terms of like the artfulness, the heaviness, the emotional depth of the games, if that makes any sense. While Pikmin 4 was still a blast to play through, I mean, I haven't been able to put it down since I got it. It definitely isn't perfect. Yeah, so play it, enjoy it. Let's show Nintendo enough appreciation for Pikmin 4 that we actually get a Pikmin 5 eventually. And I'll be doing my part. I'm making a game in my spare time just as kind of like a hobbyist thing in tower defense, which takes inspiration from the Bloons Tower Defense series actually, but just sort of makes it so that it's Pikmin that you're trying to stop from stealing a treasure, and you use the enemy creatures as tower defense towers. Subscribe if you want to see updates about that, or videos about other random topics as they fly into my head. And yeah, practice your Dandori. I'm Bexy Sakurai, and I'll catch you later.